right. Well, happy week 8, everyone. This is Tim. I think it's week 8, week 9. Actually, it's week 9. Sorry about that. Happy week 9 of Find Your True North podcast series. So, welcome all my fighters, FYTER, if you can see what I did there. I'm calling all you listeners fighters because that's what you are. You're fighting for mental health, you're fighting for yourself, you're fighting for better wellness, and I'm going to help guide you. So, welcome all fighters to Find Your True North podcast series week 9, and we're going to continue on with our men's mental health month, and we're going to focus specifically on men's mental health but also men's communication styles. And that's something that we're going to talk in depth about from my experience, as well as doing couples counseling, probably from Kaylee's experience as well too, from what I've heard through conversations or arguments or disagreements. So I will kind of use myself as the one person to model what not to do. But also I'll kind of use this as a platform to encourage all men and also encourage all genders, maybe more women, because I do more heterosexual couples counseling, encouraging them on how to support men in their communication style. So that's kind of what we'll do today. But a couple of housekeeping pieces. Just let you know that we are up and running very smoothly right now. So we are taking all insurances as possible. You can see that on our website. We're also looking at getting a second location sometime in August and September. So stay tuned for that location opening. And from what it looks like, it's going to be more of a training site as well as a child counseling center as well too. So we're tossing around the name of what to call it. I'm thinking we're going to call it Lil Woods, LIL''Woods. And we're going to hopefully create a new logo for it and everything as well too. So stay tuned. We're hoping to have some play therapy, playroom. We just have to find the right counselors that are going to be able to do that for us, because there's a huge need in the Chippewa Valley community and beyond for that. So that's a little bit. If you're looking for counseling, give us a call, 715-598-1568, or email us at info@northernwoodswellnessllc.com, and Kaylee or I will get back to you as soon as possible. So without further ado, and here's my quote, we're going to dive right on in, fighters. We're going to go dive right on into men's mental health. So if you recall from last week, I talked about why it was really important to tend to men's mental health collectively, not just on a micro level, but on a macro level as well. National men's mental health awareness, national men's mental health support, because that goes a long ways. Because if you remember from last week, I talked about how men historically have been the source of pain for a lot of minorities and women and just different aspects of life. Caucasian heterosexual men have really been oppressive. But that also is something that us men are aware of in 2025. But it's also an area that men have to be encouraged to talk about, but also to step away from. There's still that toxicity for masculinity that's occurring in our culture. And I think it's becoming more and more, we're becoming more aware of it. We're talking more about toxic masculinity. We're seeing how it's permeated our government, how it's permeated our psyche as a country and as a world too. It's not just America. This toxic masculinity is everywhere. It's a global issue, not just a United States issue. But if we can start small and begin just supporting men in their efforts to communicate to us, I think that's going to go a long way. From my experience, communication growing up as a male is very challenging, because when you're brought up as a male, you are immediately born into the color of blue. You're born into the world of, at least in Wisconsin, hunting, camping, fishing, activities, sports, none of which have a whole lot of room for emotional processing or emotional regulation. Women, on the other hand, are often brought into the color of pink, but they historically been brought into the idea of taking care of dolls, babysitting, more of that motherly figure. So it is just kind of right from the get-go, women are expected to be more emotional. Men are expected to not be emotional and expected to be strong and to not show weakness. There's a lot of research that shows that from day one, we are all, as men, just trained into this world of emotional silence, is what I'm going to call it. Just emotionally cut off from everybody. And then it gets even more confusing when you're in middle school and high school, because you haven't learned the skills that maybe some women have already had with their parents about being emotionally expressive. As a male, you are realizing that emotional expression gets you in trouble. It might get you bullied. It might get your other people to look at you weird. It might ostracize you. And so that is something that we really want to continue to focus on as we are navigating men's mental health, is what they're born into. And it's not just it's nature versus nurture. It's both here. It's not just nature. I'm sure there's aspects of our culture that has permeated our DNA at this time, but it's also not just nurture, which is being brought up through our culture and our parents. It's so intergenerational from the start of mankind that men have been seen as not allowed to be emotional. I'm going to challenge that. Men are absolutely allowed to be emotional. They need to be emotional. Otherwise, things are just going to go horribly wrong, in my opinion, especially in the relational realm of their lives. Marriages will fall apart if men don't communicate or regulate their emotions. The risk of job loss grows if men don't know how to handle anger or how to communicate feeling used or stuck or feeling hurt by their employers. It also leads to more incarceration for men because they don't know how to handle emotions, so they end up blowing up with anger, which is actually a secondary emotion, and they're not actually feeling the real emotion. So if you think of anger, it's a secondary emotion. I like to think of a blanket falling on a coffee table. All you see once that blanket is on a coffee table is the blanket. That is anger. But underneath it, the coffee table is your real primary emotion. And usually that's hurt, embarrassment, sadness, pain, fear, whatever it is. That is the emotion that we always want to get to in therapy is that primary, not the secondary, which is usually anger. Which is why you might be like, oh, I'm so angry. Even women or all genders, I'm so angry. As a therapist, I want to say, well, are you actually angry or what is the primary emotion? What is that coffee table? We don't want to just treat the blanket. We want to treat what the blanket is laying on. And that is a coffee table. That is your primary emotion. So for a lot of men, I can speak to what I see from what I've experienced as being male. There's a lot of confusion as being male. You don't really know where you fit and how are you supposed to navigate identity if you're not able to express yourself appropriately. I think that's been really hard for me as I did have some anger, but I think for me it was more of just isolation was really the primary factor that people saw, or excuse me, the secondary, but underneath it, it was fear, sadness, hurt that I was not allowed to talk about. I may have been given permission to people to talk about it, but when I did, it was almost always like disregarded or was always just met with it'll get better. It's just a phase, this will improve. Just keep doing the grind. And that always bugged the shit out of me. Excuse my language, but it just bugs the hell out of me when people say that. Because how do you know? You don't know it's going to get better. We don't know if this is just a stage or phase in our life. And I hear I'm a male, you're giving me permission to talk to you. I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, saying what I need, and then I'm met with, oh, just hang in there. That's exactly what I want to change. And you probably have already done this to your partners, women, all genders, if you're non binary. You've probably done this to your partners, whether they're male or not, but primarily it happens with men. You give them permission to open up, but when they talk, you don't know what to do with it. And then it comes off as really dismissive. And that really, really stings. So, as a partner of a male, be aware of those microaggressions. I mentioned that last week. Your microaggressions are really going to be important when you're getting a male to try to communicate with you more effectively about their emotions. When it comes to talking to a male about their emotions, don't direct them, just listen. Don't fix it, just listen. And don't focus on content of what the male is saying, but focus on what are they trying to say, but just don't really have the words. That's the meaning. Content is really, really convoluted. Content involves like where things occurred, who was there, what time of day, what caused it, why is this happening. As a therapist, I don't really care about any of that content. I care about why, or excuse me, the meaning. The fact that you are arguing is what I care about. So let me describe this a little bit better. When I deal with a couple, if a couple's coming in and they're arguing and they're saying, well, no, you said this happened on Thursday. No, I think it was on Tuesday. I would pause that argument and say, I don't really care what you guys fought about. I care that you guys have been fighting every day for about 4 or 5 months now. That is the meaning I want to get to for all humans, but particularly with men, because men are so contextual. As a partner of a male, you have to really pull them out of the context, show them that you hear the meaning. Maybe they're trying to say, hey, I feel like everything's going all crazy. You're never helping me. The dishes are always undone. Your room is always a mess. But really, what is that male trying to say? They're trying to say, I'm overwhelmed. I'm confused. I need support. Now, it gets hard because you might immediately want to go to the defensive, and men are really good at going to the defensive. So, as a supporter or a support system for men, You really have to challenge yourself to not slip into that content trap. Stay in that meaningful space. Focus on what they're trying to say, even though maybe they're probably really bad at focusing on the words and everything during an argument. So think of that in your relationships with all men. How often do men try to prove themselves right? How often do they defend themselves? How often are they getting tripped up on their words? How often are you catching them in a loop? My guess is probably a lot because men don't know how to talk about emotions. It's that simple. It goes so far back, well into their other generations in their family, that I think it's really unfair to blame that individual for trying to communicate. Granted, this doesn't mean that you need to open yourself up to abuse or get yelled at from men, but it may mean that you have to kind of look at what are they trying to do, not what are they exactly saying. And that can be really challenging as a partner. So if you are looking at wanting to learn how to navigate more of the communication styles a little bit more in depth, then feel free to give us a call. We can really work with you and your partner in a couples setting and teach you the communication skills. And when it comes down to men's communication, it's not just talking, it's listening. I would say listening is the best thing you can do for a man, for a male. Really listen. It's called active listening. If you can actively listen, not passively listen, but listen to the emotions. How are they saying it? What is their face doing? Just scanning their whole nonverbals and then listening for that latent content, that meaningful content, not the manifest content which they're creating. We want to listen for what are they trying to say. Some people call it the third eye. When you look for what a human is trying to say, you really start to develop a lot of compassion for that person, but you also realize you are a teacher and a director for that person when it comes to navigating a certain emotional space. So I'm calling upon all of you individuals who do deem yourself to be a bit more emotionally intelligent. You are probably the perfect individual to help communicate with a male that is struggling with emotional intelligence or struggling with communicating. You want to be able to be comfortable with sitting with a conversation that maybe comes up blaming, but also be a guide for that person on how they communicate their emotions better. The reason I'm sharing all this is so that way you know that what you are doing, even though you're listening and maybe not fixing anything or yelling back, by doing that, you're actually demonstrating a lot of aspects of emotional communication that no one else has probably done for this male in their lifetime, possibly. So think of how powerful that role is. I always call it the buck stops here. When someone has trauma, there's usually a point where someone says, this is not going to go on to my family anymore. This is not going to get passed on to my kids. I am the one who's going to stop this. That role I see so much in my office, and it's such a hard role for that individual to be in, but I can't think of a more important role in a family dynamic than someone who says, nope, this is done here. And unfortunately, it means a lot of sacrifice for that person. But in context of men's mental health, individuals supporting a male who is struggling with emotional intelligence or who can't communicate emotionally, you may need to really take on that idea of being a guide to them, really focusing on what are they trying to say and really challenge yourself to move away from that contextual factor. I know it's hard. You're probably any relationship you're in, friends, or especially with intimate relationships, whether it's heterosexual, homosexual, non-binary, communications about emotions are so hard because your brain wants to go right to that amygdala usage, but we don't want that at all. Keep challenging yourself. You're going to feel pain and hurt as you're talking to someone and trying to get them to open up, but the goal is to get them to open up. The goal isn't for you to be abused or be yelled at by the person, but the goal is to get them to open up. And if you can get them to open up, what does that say about you? That says that you're a good listener, that you are focusing on the right things. And this isn't stuff that we're going to answer in one podcast today. It's stuff that you really have to take some time thinking about. There's a book that I read in grad school that I really encourage all of you fighters to listen to. Or excuse me, you can listen to it, read it too. It's called The Lost Art of Listening by Michael Nichols. If I had to pick one book from my my graduate program, my master's program, that book summed up pretty much all of our challenges with listening and understanding and communication. And it was a short book, easy read. It's called The Lost Art of Listening by Michael Nichols. You can get it on audiobook and also get it in paperback. It's about $15, but it will change the way you completely listen to your partners, to your friends, which is really going to be helpful for listening and encouraging men on how to communicate, because men just communicate logically. They don't dream much. They focus on money. They focus on traditions. That's just what they do. And I think that's so ingrained in our brain from acculturation, at least in America. But once again, this is not just in America, this is everywhere. Men just have a traditional approach. We have to show them there is a different way of living. And listening, actively listening, is going to be the best tool that I think I can probably provide to anybody to do it. And it's a lifelong journey. You're not just going to pick up this book and, good, I'm an active listener. It takes forever. But why not dedicate your life to being an active listener? When you're actively listening, you're not thinking about how can I contribute to this conversation. You're not thinking about how am I coming off. You're not thinking about how are they perceiving me? Am I acting stupid? That all goes out the window because you can know that when you actively listen, they know you're listening. So you don't have to defend yourself anymore. Your brain might want to for a while, but over time, you just start to kind of naturally move into conversations. And you're probably eventually going to get to a point where you don't even know what you're going to say. And when that happens, that's a beautiful thing because that means you're fully in the moment when you're never preparing for any sort of conversation. And that's what all these podcasts are. I never plan any podcasts I'm doing. I never write any words out. And I usually only take one take on my podcast because I just feel it's really important to be authentic and to demonstrate and to communicate to you all authentically. And that's what active listening and active communication can do. So thanks for tuning on in. I know it's a lot of information, but just as a little recap, what I want to have you do is challenge yourself to really actively listen to your male partners. See if you can catch them in the contextual factor. Move your mind to the meaningful or that latent content, the more meaningful aspects of their communication, not just the words. Challenge yourself not to get too defensive with them, even if though they are. And then consider really reading that book called The Lost Art of Listening by Michael Nichols. And I bet you would have some significant improvements, not just in your intimate relationships with men, but all relationships with all genders. I think it'd be a really great place to start. And why not start that today? Because next week we're going to start talking a little bit more about other aspects of men's mental health that you can maybe help understand and support them in. So thank you so much for listening to week 9, and we'll talk to you next week as we continue our June, the month of men's mental health, and helping to develop awareness and advocacy for men. Hope all's well. Give us a call if you have any questions, 715-598-1568, or email us at info@northernwoodswellnessllc.com. Take care, fighters, and have a good rest of your day.